Family Feud has seen almost everything: nervous contestants, surprise winners, answers so wrong they became legendary. Steve Harvey has stood at that podium through thousands of tapings, through every variation of human emotion that a game show stage can produce. But there are moments, rare, unscripted, unrepeatable, where the game disappears entirely, and what is left is just the plain, unguarded truth of a person's life. This was one of those moments. It started with a question, a simple, light-hearted Family Feud question about marriage, and a woman named Gloria, 62 years old, silver-haired, wearing a yellow dress she had ironed twice that morning, gave an answer that stopped 200 people in an instant. She did not cry when she said it. She did not hesitate. She said it the way people say things they have known for a very long time and have simply never said out loud before. Clearly, quietly, with the calm of someone who has made peace with a hard truth and is only now, for the first time, letting it into the light. She said, "He never loved me," and the room went silent, not the polite transitional silence of a game show pause. The real kind, the kind that happens when 200 people have just heard something true and do not know what to do with it. Steve Harvey stood very still, and then he did what Steve Harvey does. Not the performer, not the host, but the man behind all of it. He set the game aside, and he stayed with her. What followed was one of the most quietly extraordinary things ever to happen on a game show stage. This is that story. And in that remarkable spanning you, Gloria Rise was 62 years old, a retired elementary school librarian from San Antonio, Texas, who had spent 34 years surrounded by children's books and the particular quiet of a room full of people learning to love reading. She had given story time every Thursday morning for 3 decades. She had stayed late without being asked. She had bought books with her own money when the school budget ran short. She was, by every account of every colleague and student who had ever known her, the kind of person who showed up completely. She had married Eduardo Rise when she was 26. He was handsome and certain of himself in the way of young men who have always been told they are extraordinary. He pursued her with the full force of that certainty, and Gloria, who had grown up in a quiet household with parents who expressed love through presence rather than words, had mistaken the pursuit for devotion. They had 2 children, a son, Marco, now 35, and a daughter, Isabella, now 32. The children had grown up in a house that was orderly and adequately provided for and not particularly warm. Eduardo worked. Gloria worked. The children were fed and clothed and driven to their activities. Nobody shouted. Nobody was cruel. But nobody, as Isabella would later describe it, was really seen either. Eduardo had left when Gloria was 54, not for someone else, at least not in the way that has a clear story attached to it. He had simply, over the course of about 2 years, become less present, and then one morning he was gone, with a note on the kitchen table that said he needed to find something he had been missing for a long time. He did not specify what it was. He did not ask if Gloria had also been missing something. Gloria had read the note, set it down, gone to work, and given story time that Thursday as she always did. She had not told her children for 3 days because she did not want to worry them during exam season. That was 8 years ago. In the 8 years since Eduardo left, Gloria had done something that surprised everyone who knew her, including herself. She had quietly, steadily, built a life that was more fully hers than the one she had shared. She had joined a book club. She had taken a watercolor class and discovered she had real ability. She had traveled to Mexico City with Isabella for her 60th birthday and stood in front of a Diego Rivera mural and cried, not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming recognition that beauty existed in the world and she was allowed to be in the presence of it. She was not bitter. That was the thing people noticed most about Gloria. She was not a woman carrying visible wounds or cataloging grievances. She was a woman who had survived something without drama and come out the other side with her warmth intact, which is one of the harder things a person can do. But there were things she had never said. Not to her children, not to her friends, not to the therapist she had seen briefly in the first year after Eduardo left. Things that had settled into the deep, quiet places in her and stayed there, because saying them out loud had never felt safe enough or necessary enough or simply available. It was Marco's idea. He had been watching the show on a Sunday afternoon and turned to his wife and said, unprompted, that his mother would be extraordinary on it, that she had the warmth, the humor, and the complete lack of self-consciousness that the show rewarded. He had submitted the application the same afternoon, roped in Isabella and two of Gloria's closest friends to form the team, and called his mother to tell her after the fact. Gloria had said, with characteristic dryness, "You entered me in a game show without asking me." Marco had said, "You would have said no." Gloria had paused and said, "You're right, I would have." She came anyway. She ironed the yellow dress twice. She let Isabella do her hair. She sat in the green room before the taping and read a book she had brought in her bag, because that is what Gloria did in uncertain situations. She read. The Reyes family, Gloria, Marco, Isabella, and two of Gloria's closest friends, Donna and Patricia, who had been in the book club since the beginning, faced off against a younger family from Nashville with considerable energy and an obvious strategy. The Reyes team brought something different, a quiet confidence rooted not in competition, but in the particular ease of people who genuinely like each other and are not performing for the cameras. Gloria was magnificent. She answered with precision and humor. She turned wrong answers into self-deprecating comedy, and she had a way of looking at Steve Harvey when he said something funny that made the audience feel they were watching two old friends rather than a host and a contestant. Steve responded to her immediately. She was the kind of guest he could work with. Unguarded, genuinely present, not trying to be anything other than exactly what she was. By the midpoint of the game, the Reyes family was leading, and the atmosphere in the studio was warm with the particular pleasure of watching someone unexpected excel. And then the question came up. We asked 100 married people. Steve announced with his characteristic ease, to name something that tells you your marriage is in trouble. The audience gave the murmur of recognition that this category always earns. Steve turned to the Reyes family podium. Gloria was standing at the front of the group, as she had been for most of the game. She had been quick all afternoon, quick and accurate and warm. Steve turned to her with the microphone and the grin that said he expected something good. Gloria, what tells you a marriage is in trouble? And Gloria said, without a pause, without a tremor, in the same clear and pleasant voice she had used all afternoon. When you realize he never loved you. The studio went silent. Not the brief, transitional silence of an answer being processed. A full, complete, settling silence. The kind that happens when a room of 200 people collectively understands that something has just moved from entertainment into reality. Steve Harvey did not move for a moment. His expression, which had been open and grinning, shifted into something more careful, more present. He looked at Gloria, and what he saw was not distress. Gloria was not trembling. She was not on the verge of tears. She was simply standing at the podium with a small, composed smile and the expression of a woman who had just said something true and was mildly surprised to find that it had come out so cleanly. Survey says, the board operator prompted quietly through Steve's earpiece. Steve held up one hand, not yet. Behind Gloria, Marco had gone very still. He was 35 years old and had spent 35 years in the household that Gloria's answer had just described, and he was standing behind his mother looking at the back of her yellow dress with an expression that was trying to be neutral and was not succeeding. Isabella had looked down. Her hand had moved, without her appearing to intend it, to cover her mouth. Donna and Patricia, the book club friends, exchanged a look that carried the weight of 8 years of Thursday evening conversations. The Nashville family, on the other side of the stage, had the careful stillness of people trying to be respectful of something they had not expected to be part of. And the audience, 200 people who had come to a television studio on a weekday afternoon to watch a game show, sat in the kind of collective attention that is rare and particular, the attention that people give when they are not watching entertainment anymore, when they are witnessing something. Steve Harvey looked at Gloria for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, "Tell me what you mean by that." It was not a game show question. It was a human question, the simplest and most important kind. Gloria looked at Steve Harvey for a moment, as though considering, not whether to answer, that, it seemed, had already been decided by something in her that had bypassed the usual deliberation. She was considering how to answer, how to say it accurately, which had always been important to her. She was a librarian. She valued precision. I was married for 28 years, she said, and for a long time I told myself that he loved me in his way, that some people show love differently, that quiet is not the same as absence. She paused. And then he left, and I read the note he left on the table, and it said he was looking for something he had been missing. And I realized that what he had been missing, his whole life, for all 28 years, was something he had never looked for in me. He didn't leave because he stopped loving me. He left because he never started. She said this without rancor, without performance, with the clean, carrying voice of a woman who had been a librarian for 34 years and knew how to make words reach the back of a room. I don't say that to be dramatic, she added. I say it because I spent a lot of years not saying it, and I think the not saying was costing me something. Steve Harvey had not spoken. He stood with the microphone at his side and his full attention on Gloria, and the audience watched him, watching her with the recognition that they were in the presence of something being handled exactly right. How long ago did he leave? Steve asked. 8 years. And this is the first time you've said that out loud. Gloria considered. To this many people, she said. A single soft laugh moved through the audience, the kind that is not amusement but release, the kind that comes when something true is said with just enough lightness to make it bearable. Steve Harvey moved to stand directly in front of Gloria, not performing for the audience, not building to a moment, simply giving her his full, undivided attention, which is its own kind of gift. I want to say something to you, he said, and I want you to really hear it because I mean every word. Gloria looked at him with the steady, open attention she gave everything. What you just described, marrying someone, giving 28 years to that marriage, raising children, building a life, and discovering at the end of it that the love you believed was there was something you had supplied yourself. That is one of the loneliest things a person can carry, and the fact that you are standing here in that yellow dress with your children behind you, having made a full and beautiful life on the other side of it, is not a small thing. He paused. That is an extraordinary thing. Gloria's composure held, but something in her face, something around the eyes, shifted in the way that happens when a person is receiving something they did not know they needed until it arrived. The note he left said he was looking for something he'd been missing. Steve continued. I want you to hear something. He was missing it because it was in him that it was missing. Not in you. Not in your marriage. Not in anything you did or didn't do. The capacity to love someone the way you deserve to be loved. That was what was absent in him. And you cannot supply that for another person, no matter how much you show up, no matter how many years you give. He let that settle. You didn't fail that marriage. That marriage failed to contain what you brought to it. There is a difference, and I need you to know that. Behind Gloria, Marco Reyes was no longer trying to keep his expression neutral. He was 35 years old, and he had his mother's steady eyes and his father's height, and he was, at this moment, neither of those things. He was simply a son who was standing behind his mother in a television studio, hearing her say the thing she had never said, and hearing Steve Harvey say the thing back to her that she had needed to hear, and it was undoing him. He stepped forward, not dramatically, just forward, the way you move when you need to be closer to something. Mom, he said. Gloria turned. I knew, Marco said. I knew when I was a kid. I didn't have the words for it, but I knew that the house didn't feel like. He stopped. Tried again. I knew that what you gave us was not what you were getting back. And I watched you do it anyway, every single day, for my whole childhood. And I never said thank you. I never said. His voice broke on the last word, and he did not try to repair it. I never said I saw you. Gloria reached up and put her hand on her son's face the way mothers do. The gesture that is older than language, that says everything that words approach but cannot quite hold. Marco covered her hand with his. Isabella moved in from the other side. and the three of them stood together at the podium in the way of people who have been through something long and hard together and are, finally, standing in the same place at the same time acknowledging it. The audience was on its feet. It was not the roaring, chest-thumping applause of a big game show win. It was something quieter and more sustained, the sound that 200 people make when they have been genuinely moved and want the people in front of them to feel it, a standing ovation that was also, somehow, a kind of collective exhale. When the room had settled, not fully, but enough, Steve Harvey turned back to Gloria one more time. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Gloria said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were bright. "What has the last 8 years looked like for you?" The real version. Gloria almost smiled. Then she did smile, fully, the warm and unhurried smile of a woman who has a good answer. "Beautiful," she said. "Honestly. Quieter than I expected, but beautiful. I paint now. Watercolors mostly. I travel when I can. I read more than ever, which I didn't think was possible. I have my Thursday book club and my children and my friends." She glanced at Donna and Patricia, who were both, by this point, openly crying. "I wake up in my own house and I get to decide what the day holds. And there is a freedom in that." She paused, searching for the precise word the way librarians do. "A freedom that I did not know I was missing, because I had never had it." Steve Harvey nodded slowly. "And are you happy?" "Yes," Gloria said, simply and without qualification. "I am." "Then let me tell you what I see," Steve said. "I see a woman who was handed a life that was smaller than she deserved, and who built something larger out of the pieces of it. I see a woman whose children stood up behind her just now and said, 'We see you.' I see someone who said the hardest true thing in a room full of strangers and didn't flinch." He held her gaze. "That is not a woman who was never loved. That is a woman who was always worth loving, and who finally, has the life that proves it." The game did continue. The show's producers made the quiet, sensible decision to carry on after the moment had naturally resolved, and the Reyes family played out the rest of the episode with the loose, warm energy of people who have just set down something heavy and feel the difference. They did not win the grand prize, but they played joyfully, and Gloria landed 2 more answers that brought the audience back to laughter, because that is who Gloria was. She did not stay in heavy moments longer than they required. After the taping, the family gathered in the corridor outside the studio. Donna and Patricia surrounded Gloria and held on to her in the way of women who have known each other long enough that they do not need to explain why. Marco stood to the side with his hands in his pockets, looking at the floor, still processing. Isabella stayed close to her mother, quieter than usual, in the manner of someone who has heard a thing that is going to take time to fully understand. Steve Harvey came to find them before they left the building. He shook Marco's hand. He spoke briefly with Isabella. Then he stood with Gloria for a few minutes and talked about her watercolors, which she had mentioned, and about San Antonio, which he knew, and about books, because she was a librarian and he was a reader, and that particular conversation between those two kinds of people never runs short. He told her, before they parted, that she was one of the most genuinely dignified people he had met on that stage in all his years of hosting. Gloria thanked him and told him he had asked the right questions, which was, she said, the most important skill a person could have. It was, Steve Harvey later noted, exactly the kind of thing a librarian would say. The broadcast, when it aired 8 weeks later, generated a response that the Family Feud production team described as unlike anything in recent memory, not for its volume alone, but for its character. The clip of Gloria's answer and everything that followed it moved through social media not as a sensational moment, but as something people returned to and shared in the manner of things that mean something personal to them. The phrase she had used, "He never loved me," became, in the weeks following the broadcast, something of a touchstone for a conversation that many people had been conducting privately for years. Women in their 50s and 60s wrote in their thousands to say that they had recognized something in Gloria's words that they had not had language for before. Not all of them were in failed marriages. Some were in marriages that continued, to outward appearances, intact, but they recognize the particular loneliness of loving a person who cannot fully receive what you offer. And the years spent telling yourself that quiet is not absence, that a certain kind of man shows love differently, that showing up consistently is its own form of devotion even when it is never truly met. A therapist in Atlanta who specializes in late-life transitions wrote a widely shared piece in which she described the clip as capturing something her clients struggled for months to articulate: the difference between a marriage that ended and a marriage that, in some essential sense, never fully began. She wrote that the courage Gloria demonstrated, not in breaking down, but in simply stating the truth plainly, without apology or performance, was the kind of courage her clients were working toward in their sessions, and that seeing it modeled so clearly had accelerated more than a few of those processes. For Gloria's children, the broadcast carried a particular weight. They had grown up in the household their mother had described. They had seen what she had absorbed quietly, day after day, across their entire childhoods. And they had, in the way of children who love their parents and do not want to add to their burdens, largely said nothing. In the weeks after the episode aired, both of them made changes. Marco called his mother every Sunday morning, not a significant call, not a processing session, just a regular, reliable check in that said, "I am here, I am thinking of you, you are not alone in this." He had not done this before, not consistently, and both of them knew what the consistency meant without discussing it. Isabella began a journal. She wrote in it about her childhood, about what she had watched her mother carry, about the ways she had learned, without knowing it, to expect less than she deserved in her own relationships. She brought some of what she was writing into therapy. She later said that watching her mother stand at that podium and say the hardest thing clearly and without shame had given her permission to do the same in the privacy of her own life. I had been protecting that truth for her. Isabella said in the follow-up segment the show produced 3 months after broadcast. All those years, I thought I was protecting her by not naming it, but watching her name it herself, and watching the room receive it the way it did, I understood that the protection wasn't what she needed. The truth was what she needed. The truth is what we all needed. The 2 months after the episode aired, Gloria Rise was approached by a small gallery in San Antonio that had seen the clip and learned, through the local press coverage that followed, that she was a painter. They asked to see her work. She brought 12 pieces. They offered her a show. The show, which ran for 3 weeks in the spring following the broadcast, was attended by people who had no previous connection to the gallery world. Women from Gloria's book club, former students from the school where she had worked for 34 years, strangers who had seen her on television and come to see what she made. The opening night was, by the gallery owner's account, the most attended event they had hosted in 11 years. Gloria sold 9 paintings. She used part of the proceeds to buy a first-edition set of illustrated children's books for the library at her former school, which she had quietly continued to support in her retirement. She was asked by a local journalist at the gallery opening whether she felt the television moment had changed her life. She thought about it for a moment in the careful way she thought about things. "It didn't change my life," she said. "My life was already good. What it changed was that I stopped carrying something alone, and when you stop carrying something alone, it gets lighter. Not gone, lighter. There is a difference, and the difference matters." In an interview conducted several months after the episode, Steve Harvey was asked about the Gloria moment, whether he had known in the instant she answered what he was going to do. "No," he said. "I never know. That's not how it works. What I knew was that something real had just happened and the format didn't matter anymore. The format is a container. Sometimes what's inside it outgrows the container. When that happens, you put the container down." He was asked whether he had hesitated at all, whether any part of the host's instinct had pulled him back toward the game. "The game was going to be there in 5 minutes," he said. "Gloria was standing right in front of me. That's not a hard choice." He paused, then continued in a quieter register. She said she had spent years not saying it, and that the not saying was costing her something. "I understood that. I have not said things in my life that I should have said earlier. I know what that costs. I was not going to be the person who moved past that moment. Not that day. He was asked what he thought Gloria had given the people watching. Permission. He said, without hesitation. She gave people permission to say the true thing. The thing that has been sitting inside them, the thing they've been managing and containing and protecting other people from. She said it simply, without drama, without asking anyone for anything, and the room received it. That's what people needed to see. That you can say the hard true thing and the room will not collapse. The room will hold you. Gloria Reyes's moment on Family Feud touched something that few television moments manage to reach: the specific, private grief of a life that looked, from the outside, like a life. That had the correct shape, the correct contents, the marriage and the children and the house and the years. But that was missing, at its center, the thing that was supposed to make it mean something. It is a grief that is difficult to name because it lacks the clear event of a tragedy. Nobody died, nobody was villainous. The damage was done quietly, over decades, in the accumulation of small absences rather than dramatic acts. It is, for that reason, a grief that many people carry without fully acknowledging it, even to themselves, because acknowledging it feels like ingratitude, or like failure, or like tearing down something that others can see is standing. Gloria named it. In a room full of strangers, on national television, in a yellow dress she had ironed twice, and the room went silent because the room recognized it. That is what the moment was. Not a scandal, not a dramatic revelation, a recognition. The particular, quiet power of one person saying something true and 200 people understanding, simultaneously, that they have been waiting for someone to say it. A year after the taping, Gloria Reyes was painting regularly, attending her Thursday book club without exception, planning a trip to Osaka with Isabella, and receiving, every Sunday morning, a phone call from her son. She had, at the gallery owner's invitation, begun teaching a watercolor class on Saturday mornings for adults, many of them women in or past middle age, many of them in possession of lives that looked correct from the outside and felt constrained from within. She was, by all accounts, a remarkable teacher, patient, precise, generous with attention in the particular way of people who have been starved of it themselves and have chosen, rather than hoarding it, to give it away. She was asked, in one of the Saturday classes, by a student who had recognized her from the clip, what she would tell her younger self. The woman who had married Eduardo at 26, believing that pursuit was devotion. Gloria set down her brush. She thought about it with the thoroughness she gave everything. I would tell her, she said, that the love you generate is not evidence that it is being returned. That you can fill a room with your warmth and still be in a cold room. That the question to ask, early and honestly, is not do I love this person, but does this person have the capacity to love me back? Not the willingness, the capacity. She picked her brush back up, and I would tell her, she added, that if the answer is no, there is still a full life available on the other side of that answer. A beautiful one. It is not the life you planned, but it is yours, all the way through. It is yours. Gloria Reyes walked into that studio carrying 8 years of unsaid truth, and 34 years of a marriage that was missing something she had supplied every day, without knowing it was not being returned. She walked out with her son's hand on her face and her daughter beside her, and 200 strangers on their feet. Not from spectacle, but from recognition. From the particular, collective relief of a hard thing being said plainly and a room rising to meet it. Steve Harvey, who has made a career of reading rooms, read this one exactly right. He set the game down. He asked the right questions. He said the thing that Gloria needed to hear from someone outside her own life, and when she told him she was happy, simply, without qualification, he believed her, because it was true, and because joy that has been earned through difficulty has a quality that is unmistakable. What Gloria gave everyone watching was not a cautionary tale. It was not an indictment. It was something rarer and more useful, an example of what it looks like to carry a hard truth with dignity, to say it when the moment arrives, and to discover, in the saying of it, that the room is large enough to hold you. It is never too late to be seen. It is never too late to say the true thing, and the life waiting on the other side of that truth. the watercolors, the book club, the Sunday morning calls, the trip to Oaxaca, is not a consolation prize. It is the life, the one that is fully, completely at last yours.